Right, so I am in the middle of this project and I'm making a coffee table with a round top on it, a big round top. And in order for me to cut this out, there's several ways I can do it. But the best way for me at this point right now is with a router and a jig for making circles. I don't own one, so I figured this would be a good time for me to stop and go ahead and do a little video on how to make a circle jig for your router. So go ahead and follow along, and thank you for being here, and Shaloha. So I'm going to be cutting out some plexiglass, or Lexan, whatever you want to call it. Right there, you see that? This is a blade for my table saw. It says plastic. Not super important, but it does make a huge difference as far as keeping it from burning or chipping or cracking when doing that. So I'm going to put this on my table saw. I'm just using the base of the router to get the width I need for the jig. So what I'm doing here is I'm removing the base plate from the router so I can use it as a template for where the holes need to be drilled for the mounting to the jig. And then I'm going to mark center of the jig so I can make a line for the slot that needs to be routed in for the screw plate. Alright, so I found this little 5/16 inch knob. And so the next thing that we got to do is I'm going to put this on the router table and cut out a slot here that's a 5/16 inch slot that's going to run from here all the way to about maybe 3 inches from the base of the template. So here I'm cutting a piece of steel that's going to be a backing plate for the knob for the slide that's going to go in the center of the jig. Just cleaning it up. Going to tap a hole in the center of it and thread it. But before I do that, I'm going to use this router bit to cut a recessed slot in the base of the jig to accept the plate, so it sits flush on the bottom of the jig. Here I'm just marking out where the center of the plate is, so I know where to drill the hole to be tapped for the knob. All right, so I was a little bit unsure about this part here. So I've got the knob with the little backer plate, and if you loosen it up, it can slide in this. It can slide in the slot. Now, in order to anchor this to the actual piece of wood that I'm going to be using the router on, I want it to sit flush. So I'm going to grind these threads off flush, and then what I'm going to do is drill a hole through the center of the knob all the way through to the other side in the diameter of a nail that can slide in and out of there. So what I can do is then set this on the piece of wood, slide the nail in, tap it in, and that'll be my anchor. And then when I want to take it out, I can just take a hammer or whatever and kind of pop it out, in theory. We'll see. I only have one other knob, so hopefully this works. So here I'm just drilling out the center of the knob. That's going to accept the, it's actually a screw, not a nail. And then I'm just cleaning up the jig itself. I'm rounding out the front of the jig and then drilling the holes that are going to accept the base plate of the router. And here I'm just countersinking those holes so that the screws that hold the base plate on will sit flush on the bottom of the router bit, the jig itself. Now this may be unnecessary, but I'm just tapering the jig itself from the front to the back
just to give it a better appearance and a slimmer look. And then also just curving the back so there's no sharp edges and cleaning it up.
I just realized I forgot to cut the hole for the router bit. I'm actually going to do it with the router itself. I'm going to plunge a hole into it, but I'm going to use a bigger bit than the one I'm using right now, so I got to change that out. We'll put a hole in it, and I'll come back and we'll cut this out.
As you can see here, I decided against using a nail as an anchoring point and decided to use a screw, which was a much better idea and actually works really well.
Well, that worked perfectly. I couldn't be happier. So, made a perfect circle. Get this out of here now. And then what I'll do is I'll come back around, I'll cut this out with the jigsaw the rest of the way, and then we'll cut it, and then we'll flush it up with the flush bit and get it all cleaned up.
If you have a good sharp router bit and it's long enough, this step is not necessary. You can actually just plunge cut all the way through. Just be careful that the centerpiece, or the piece that you're cutting out, when you get to the end of your circle, when it plunges all the way through, that the piece does not move and cause it to gouge inside of the hole that you're cutting it out of.
Well, I'm absolutely pleased. The jig worked perfectly. It cut out this tabletop in a perfect round circle. As you can see, this is a coffee tabletop that I'm doing another project, and it's going to be another video, so look for that one. Anyway, if you like this video, hit the subscribe and like buttons. It's much appreciated. And even if you didn't like it, hit the subscribe and like buttons. Thank you, as always, for being here, and Shaloha.